Just like to introduce Mr. Caucus. For those of you that don't know him, he was our former treasurer for the county when you paid your taxes. You probably see his name on, and he wrote the checks. And I know, Jim, we talked about you removed your name from those checks eventually. But he's now the Thriving Communities Director for the Institute. How we came about this program was we were at a NOCA dinner. Tom Troyer was with me at the dinner. We attended it. We're all a part of NOCA, if you don't know, Northeast Ohio City Council Association, and we have different speakers come up. Jim came up and spoke about some different tree stewardship programs. Sounded very interesting, talking about how we can go ahead and help ourselves with programs. We know about different things we need with trees in our city. We all complain about where they're planted, how come they don't grow right, and maybe they're not conducive for the spaces. So Jim took a ride with me, and we took a look around the city, and he's here to tell you more about it, so no further ado, Mr. Caucus.
Thank you, Councilman, and thank you for inviting me here. I really enjoyed doing that presentation that night, and I enjoyed coming back to see my friend Mayor Coyne, who I've not seen in a long time, and many members of the council. I always tell when I go to councils, I always say for 19 years in a row, I spent every Monday night at Cleveland City Council. I'd always get a knot in the pit of my stomach before I walked into the chamber, but it's nice to go into chambers where I don't get any more knots in my stomach. And maybe you get them, but I don't anyway. So when I left office back in 2010, at the end of 10, when they changed county government, I ended up going to the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, primarily to set up land banks throughout Northeast Ohio. And now we've set up land banks all over Ohio. We've got 23, but my work kept evolving. And one of the things we got involved with was planting trees, or I should say greening efforts, because we've been very heavily involved in raising money for demolition. We've raised about $230 million in the last 3 years to knock down houses in Ohio, taken down over 20,000 blighted properties. And one of the questions asked me by my board is, okay, you're knocking the houses down, then what? And it became sort of logical that there'd be a greening component. And we got involved in this issue of planting trees. In fact, the Land Conservancy ended up buying out of bankruptcy 2 tree farms in Lake County. We're in the process of moving a lot of those trees out into communities throughout Northeast Ohio. We planted about 100 today in the St. Luke's neighborhood by St. Luke, the old St. Luke's Hospital. So the slideshow was right there on Mr. Salvatore's head. Sorry, Mr. Salvatore, we're right behind you there. Your house was almost a blighted property. Anyway, your head was. So this is an example of what we do. We've been involved in stewarding and conserving land. So we've been heavily involved in doing work in the countryside. We've conserved about 40,000 acres as far east as Ashtabula, as far west as the islands, as far south as the Ohio River in Belmont County. And that's just an example of where we protected properties all over northern Ohio. So it's 560 properties, 42,000 acres. What that means is we find the money to buy them, we preserve them, they remain natural, they remain wild, they don't get developed. There's no Kmart, no Walmart going on those property, and they're available. We just had a story in the Plain Dealer last week. We just developed a new one in Medina County. There's about 200, I don't know if you're a heron fan, but a heron rookery, heronry in the Medina County. I don't have the address, it's on our website, but it's going to be open next weekend for the first time. So we've also, as I said, been very heavily involved in taking down houses. There's about, early estimates was in Ohio, there's 100,000 houses when we started that need to come down in the distressed areas of Ohio. We're down now by 20,000. There's still about 12,000 to 13,000 left in Cuyahoga County. So we've been involved in creating urban parks. This is a park we did in a neighborhood in Akron on Triplet Boulevard in the Akron area near the Goodyear Trust Track. And just a quick story about why we're in cities. If you look at that map on your left up high there, that was the map of 1950, and every dot represented population. So as you see, back in the infancy of Brook Park, most of the county, or a significant part of the county, was undeveloped. If you look at it today, that's the map in 2000. There's virtually the only green space left in the county is the Emerald Necklace. So as I said earlier, we've been getting really heavily involved in replanting trees. The effort is called Reforest Our City. We've partnered with the Holden Arboretum and with a group called Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. Right now, tonight in Parma, there is training going on. We're training volunteers. I don't have to tell you that cities are broke, and the cities have to choose between planting trees and paying police, or planting trees or paying recreation workers, or maintaining other vital city services. Trees are not really winning out. So part of what we've done is been heavily involved now in training volunteers, teaching them how to maintain trees and how to plant them, and then it's up to us to find the money to movement of these communities. This is something you can't see very well, but I want, if I can, show you this. This is the tree canopy map done by Cuyahoga County Planning Commission. And it shows what the average tree canopy is in Cuyahoga County. And that line right in the middle is about 37%. At the top of this line are the wealthiest communities in Cuyahoga County. They've got a really high tree canopy ratio. The worst tree canopy ratio in Cuyahoga County was North Randall. It's at the very bottom. And this might surprise you, and I have to tell you, Councilman, when I came out with you last week, I was a little taken aback. The second worst tree canopy in Cuyahoga County is Brook Park. It's just above North Randall, it's below Cleveland, it's below Warrensville. And when I talked to county planning, I asked them how it was, because I was out, and it's not like the city doesn't have trees, but they explained that they look at the total footprint of a city, how much permeable surface, impermeable parking lots, buildings, and that's the number that came up. So as you can see, the bottom is North Randall, Brook Park above that, Warrensville Heights, Cleveland, and Lindale. So our goal is to try to get, in most of these communities, certainly in Cleveland where we're partnering, the tree canopy ratio up to 37%. There's Cleveland, it's 18, Cuyahoga is 38. If you look at Google Earth, I don't know if you ever play with it, you can almost tell exactly where the boundaries of the city of Cleveland are and where they're not, just based on tree canopy. So you can see this is the border of Cleveland Heights, it comes out here. Of course, in the areas of Lakewood, especially on the east side, it bleeds out, there's not much in the way of tree canopy. But you get a sense of where trees are planted and where they're not from Google Earth. And that's the aerial imagery of Brook Park. We did the same thing there. We used the Google Earth maps. I'll be real quick on this. There are studies coming out, it seems like one a week, about the importance of parks and the proximity of green space to communities. Studies of neighbors in Boulder showed the property values. The further away you got from a park, the more your property values went down. There's stories about where people who have money or people who are middle class live in very nicely treed neighborhoods, and then where there are no trees, people tend to be poor. I don't buy that entirely, but there is a correlation. The one that I think is, the best studies I've seen are talk about what trees do in terms of making a neighborhood healthier. One thing for sure is they keep water out of storm sewer systems. I know a lot of people complain, council people, I know this, I'd get called. For every call I got asking for a tree, I got 10 asking me to take a tree down. I've heard the complaints when I was in council about leaves and about block sewers. But here's the reality. The reality is where there are trees, neighborhoods are healthier. And where there are trees, it alleviates it. I can give you this, here it is. This is an interesting study done by University of Pennsylvania Medical School. Living near more trees means fewer antidepressants, alleviates dementia, stress, depression. So as we do this throughout Ohio, one thing we have seen is kind of a desire, especially among a lot of these young folks coming into communities, to try to regreen these cities. I'll just keep going through these slides. Home energy costs. The trees keep neighborhoods cooler in the summer. They keep them warmer in the winter. And I'll go right through these. I'm not going to go through all these statistics with them. But here it is. They filter stormwater runoff, groundwater recharge. Good for business. This is something you'll see a lot of communities where there are business strips, communities trying to go in and plant trees. Not just plant any kind of tree, plant the right kind of tree. The one thing you don't want is the wrong kind of tree growing, so the power company can come in and destroy the tree when they have to clear the lines. So the Reforest City program, let me just tell you quickly and then I'm going to let you get on with your business. We are in the process now of doing these tree training sessions all over Caucus County, primarily in Cleveland. Like I said, they're in Parma tonight off on Ridgewood at the Metro Park Center. There are two guys who are trained arborists. It's about a 6-hour class. At the end of 6 hours, I'm telling you, you take this class for 6 hours over 2 nights, you get a pretty good idea of what kind of trees you want to plant in the neighborhood, what kind of trees you don't want to plant, where to plant them, how to maintain them, what to look for as a tree is growing, how to prune a tree, and what the do's and don'ts of tree planting. So one of the things you could do here is, if you want, we could set those up. If you have a committee of citizens interested in trying to find a way to plant trees, we can set that tree training program up here, anywhere you choose, on nights you choose. I think you find the program interesting. I know that you asked me, Councilman DeMico, about where we're going to get the money. Alan Stewart, number 2 there at ODNR, there are monies made available for tree planting throughout Ohio through Ohio Department of Natural Resources. There's also money made available, something called the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. We've gotten about $350,000 for the city of Cleveland in just the past 2 years. So there are monies available, but you have to plan in advance. You have to know where you want to plant trees, and you want to make sure there's an interest here in the community. So number 4 there, as you can see, we talked about tree steward. Number 4 is plant trees, encourage residents and business owners to plant trees. One thing I did notice is that you have a lot of businesses, those campus-type settings where they have a business, a big lawn setback, and virtually no trees. Our tree stewards, our tree arborists would come out. They both want to come out, and they would sit with you, and they would go over where they think it might make sense to plant trees. Most communities can't afford an arborist. I'm sure you don't have one, and I'm sure your work here is handled by the service department. That's the case in most communities. We've talked about coordinating with adjoining communities. You also talked to me about the on and off ramps at freeways. And it's a matter of contacting ODOT about tree planting, contacting your state rep and state senators. Some communities have been very aggressive in asking for assistance in planning, have significant tree plantings at the on and off ramps. We talked about that in the office. We think we can put you in the right people. And number 7 is going to depend on how some court cases come out. But NEORSD has talked about planting trees to mitigate stormwater damage, stormwater issues, but there's a litigation that affects some of the money they wanted to target for this. So there it is. I ran through it quickly because I know you have a lot of other business. We did this presentation at the Northeastern Ohio City Council Association, and we've now been involved in about 4 communities: Lakewood, Euclid. We had people in from Bedford last week. I was with people from Brooklyn the week before last, and I know Councilman D'Amico, you had asked me to come in and say hello. So, and make the presentation. So I'm more than willing to come back with our staff. If you're interested in the tree steward training, let me know. We can set that up. It's free. We come out, we provide dinner, or at least sandwiches and snacks, through a grant we received from one of the foundations. And so far we've trained about 180 people as of last night, I'm told. They've actually finished the 6-hour class. So I don't want to take too much of your time. If you want to ask questions, I'll answer the best I can.
Mr. Chairman, just 2 things.
Go ahead.
2 things, Mr. Caucus. You want to just touch real quick on the trees in the backyards. We talked about giving people trees, actually being able to put on their property, since we couldn't do as a city because that's city money.
You can't, right. So here's what I've seen happening, and this is what we like. The program putting together here is based on a program we saw in Pittsburgh called Tree Pittsburgh. There they have taken vacant land and they have planted literally thousands of seedlings. They get volunteers to maintain them on vacant land over the course of 2, 3, 4 years. At the end of a couple years, 2 years, 3 years out, those trees are ready to be planted. And the reason these arborists are so important is they can give you a good sense of what trees make sense, which are indigenous, which should be planted here, right, in Northeast Ohio. And I don't know if you ever, I know that Pittsburgh has always been our competition in football, but let me tell you, they're doing some things right. And if you visit some of those neighbors in Pittsburgh, they've taken vacant land and they've got volunteers maintaining these little tree farms. And at the end of a couple years, they move them out into the backyards of properties all over the city of Pittsburgh. They planted 25,000 trees since 2006. And the most important thing is that 90% of them are still alive. The city of Cleveland, back under a mayor named Mike White, planted about 40,000 trees through Cleveland Public Power. And my understanding is they're almost all dead. So if you're going to plant a tree, have the maintenance in place to take care of it. And unfortunately, because of city budgets and what they are, you're probably going to have to rely upon volunteers to do a lot of that work.
And one more thing, can you give me the statistics on the sewer, water, take drainage and for the canopy?
A mature tree keeps between 30 and 40,000 gallons of water out of the storm sewer system. Now the problem is you're not going to be getting mature trees, So the old saying in Africa is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is today. So you're not going to have an immediate mitigation effect, but I think if you work with regional sewer, I think regional sewer should play a critical role in this all over their footprint, because we know it'll keep water out of their storm sewers.
Thank you.
Councilman Mancini.
Mr. Caucus, first, thanks for coming.
Thanks for
Appreciate that. Nice to meet you also. Me personally, you were right on 2 facts. Number 1, the depression part, nothing like a good ride through our beautiful Metro Park system, what it does for you. The other part was, you were right, trees. I get a lot of calls, probably my last 4, our service director could contest it. I need it down. And is there any special type of tree with this program that you put in, or that plays a big favorite with your program that you put in? Because some trees, like you say, after 20 years, they get a little too big, tear up some sewers, tear up some utility lines.
And I mean this, Councilman, I think what you do, if you're interested, I'd bring them back to this caucus or wherever you want to see them. Maybe we can do a tree training here. You ought to talk to the 2 arborists. One works for for Holden Arboretum. You know, Holden was out there in Lake County. They had nothing to do with anything in Cuyahoga County. About 6 months ago, they took over the Cleve Botanical Garden. So they now want to be heavily involved, not just out in Lake County taking care of the Arboretum, they want to be involved in tree planting in Northeast Ohio. And in the city, we call, the new name we gave them was Holden in the Hood. I'm not sure they appreciate the name, but it's funny, I never saw them, and now they're here, and it's great. Their guy, Chad Klink, and our guy are just phenomenal. You bring them in, and they'll go through, they can give you a history of cities that have made mistakes about planting the wrong kind of trees on tree lawns. And look, you know what happens. Utilities, they plant them on tree lawns, and you've got these V's, you know, where they basically just say, it's not just here. It's all over, I've seen them all over Ohio. So the trees that are more respectful of the small space, but then they will work with you on what trees they think make sense for both backyard and for spaces on business. I made a call, and I probably should have called somebody here. I know Ford has a carbon offset program where they have been involved in some greening, and I'm curious to know if they'd be willing to make some of that carbon offset money available here for planting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Need a motion, this was discussed.
So made, Mr. Chairman.
Support.
Motion made, properly supported under discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thanks for having me, thank you.
Okay, we've got item 4, Recreation Committee Chairman, Councilman Bergio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honoring the Berea Mid-Park Titans boys basketball team for their winning the back-to-back Southwest Conference Championship and District runner-up, declaring an emergency introduced by Councilman Bergio. We did also honor them in the fall. I think some of these kids are the same kids that were on the football team, and they did it again, winning back-to-back Southwest Conference champs. So I wanted to recognize them and possibly put it on the next council agenda. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman?
I'd like to make a motion to place on the next council agenda.
Support.
And I'd also like to ask you, are you taking co-sponsors?
Yes, I am. Motion has been made, properly supported for the next council agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Also, Mr. Chairman, if I can sneak this in too, every year we sponsor some students for the Best of Brook Park, and I'd like to ask council if they're willing to do that again. The only change this year, I think we sponsored 6 last time. We'd be maybe sponsoring only 3 because we thought it'd be a good idea to honor those kids that run the academic challenge and did so well. And as Councilman Salvatore had recognized them for that, so I thought maybe we do that. So if you just wanted to make that commitment, I'd like to know so I can tell Nancy Brayford also.
Amen.
Councilman willing to do that? I think it's unanimous. Thank you. I'll pass it on to her and I'll give you the details soon. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Got item 5, Safety Committee Chairman, Councilman Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have one item this evening. I have a resolution requesting the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio to limit utility providers' ability to conduct home solicitation, introduced by Councilwoman Powers. Jan, did you want to speak on that?
Yes, I introduced this because the people who come to your door are very aggressive and insistent that you sign up with them, and you don't know anything about their company, and people are afraid, whether they're young people or old people, they're afraid to open their door to a stranger anymore. And usually they come around later in the evening, and I just don't think it's a good idea to have people pressured because there are so many other ways that they can contact you, which I'm sure all of us get the solicitation in our utility bills every month, wanting us to change to some other company. So there are other ways to do it other than coming out and knocking on the door and being too insistent with people. Thank you.
Any questions by anyone? Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see that, I understand, Jan, what you're proposing here too. I just wanted to ask, Our law director, are we able to limit anybody from soliciting at all legally?
In terms of, there is an ordinance in place that regulates, people who come door to door. So this is my understanding. This is just a resolution requesting anyone related to Public Utilities Commission, not to use aggressive tactics. So this wouldn't override or change the existing ordinance that we have. My understanding, this is just an ordinance asking the PUCO, in terms of not using aggressive tactics to, go home to home. So I don't think this would change any of that.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Anyone else? Councilman Jacobs.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding of this is to ban it, not just to eliminate aggressive. It says to ban it in there. The first section, it requests the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio to ban door-to-door solicitation by the utility providers. I know we have a mechanism in place where people have to register with our police department and ID, but this actually says ban. So I guess Councilman Bergio's question is, are we allowed to actually ban some? I know we're probably not allowed to ban, but is the Public Utilities Commission allowed to pass a law banning companies that sell providing electricity from soliciting door to door? I have the feeling the answer to that is no, but.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. Oh, I'm sorry. If I may.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. In section 1, we're just requesting that they do it. So we're not outlawing or banning it in our city. As far as what the power of Public Utilities Commission, I really don't know if they do have a specific ability. But this, number 1, is just a resolution, and it's just really requesting public utilities to, again, ban this activity. They can choose to do what they want with this resolution, take it in consideration, whatever. But I don't know the answer to what the powers of the Public Utility Commission are in this regard. My understanding is this resolution is really just requesting them to look at that and to do whatever they can to ban it. And this does not make it illegal or anything in our city for what we do. Just so for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Lauder.
You're welcome.
Councilman Troyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with the law director. It is just a resolution, and I think asking to ban it would show the seriousness of it, because I had some issues with the residents in my ward with this, and especially in the winter months when it's dark. It gets dark early and the people are out there, so I'd like to make a motion to place it on the next council meeting.
I support it.
But before I accept that motion, is there any other discussion? I don't want to miss anybody. Okay, we have a motion made, properly supported, to place on the next council agenda. Any questions on the motion? Michelle, just call the roll.
Troyer,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Higgins,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Salvatore,
Yes.
D'Amico.
Yes.
That concludes my committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Need a motion to go to the addendum.
Motion made.
Support.
Motion made, properly supported. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. Go to item 1, under discussion. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a demolition program agreement with the Caucus County of Ohio and declaring an emergency, introduced by Mayor Coyne. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for facilitating this. Our grant writer for the city went after this grant, and I think you saw various awards in the paper, and this will help us address, and Mike Dolan will make a presentation at a succeeding meeting here talking about the vacants and disclosures or foreclosures, properties that we could avail ourselves of using these funds. So we're grateful we will consider for that amount.
Neil, do you?
Yeah, if I could just add, I would just add that actually late last week, we're awarded the $380,000. So as soon as this can get passed, we can then get this down to the county and then start receiving this grant money. So I would just humbly suggest, this is time sensitive, so the quicker we pass it, the the quicker we can start implementing or get access to these funds.
Okay, thanks, Neil. We'll go to Councilman Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on what I just heard, I would make a motion to place on tonight's council agenda and encourage all members of council to suspend so we can get moving on this. Is there a second to that?
He's made a motion, but you want to discuss it
This is
first?
on- Yeah, we still in discussion.
Rick, if we stay and discuss it first, then we'll entertain your motion.
Well, I, for one, good for the grant writer on this one. I do know when we got this, that there was a list of houses that were potentially, maybe Mayor, you could answer this, or Neil, is this just maybe to tear some of them down, the worst ones, or just maybe get the process going maybe a little faster for some of the others?
Okay, here's the answer to the question. We probably have 300 homes in the city that are either vacant or in foreclosure or in various states. And what we're doing is going back and forth on this right now. We've had various contractors come in, for instance, the house on Christine and Burton. They made a proposal to build a brand new house there. And a brand new house on Musking, but they'd like to rehab a house on Hummel Road. And we're having a debate right now, are we better off going forward? Because, you know, we've had enough experience with fixer-uppers in the town. We're not trying to, you know, but what our thrust, and what we want to do is, can we get improved housing stock in the community to attract younger families and use this program? So when Mike comes in, we'll have, Mr. Chairman and others, we'll have this discussion about how we should do this and allocate. But we have, I think last year we did 4 demolitions last year. I wouldn't see that being a lot more this year because there's a process that has to go through.
Right.
But I think you as a councilman going out there, for instance, there's been a house on Dark Drive, and that's been various transfers of ownership, and someone's going to fix it up, and now it's sitting there, and now somebody's coming back again. How long? The longer that house sits there, are we better off if there is a program where somebody wants to build a brand new house in our town, then we can set streetscape standards and other things to that home. Okay, so we don't have a dozen addresses now. Right now, we might have 3 or 4 that we're looking at this. As we go through this, council can help identify areas in your wards that you think need that attention.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Councilman Higgins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair of the mayor, are there any restrictions on this money, Mayor, if you tear down a distressed property as far as rebuilding on that same
I don't
parcel?
believe there is, Brian. I don't believe there is, but again, I wanted Mike, this kind of happened very quickly. We applied, I don't know if you guys did, we applied, and the next thing you know, we got the money. We're looking at how we can combine this with some of the appropriations council just made on neighborhood improvements. So we're in the process of putting together a presentation to you, and we'll get an answer to that question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the Chair of the Law Director, there's no agreement attached to this. Can you outline the agreement, what it is?
Yeah, I just received it late Friday, so I've not had a chance myself to digest it. Like the mayor just related, this is moving very fast. We applied and they just started making the announcements last week. And so as we go through this, the time-sensitive nature though is that there's this money there and we've been awarded it. And in talking to Mr. Dolan, he related that the sooner we got this legislation passed down to the county, then we could access this grant money that much quicker. So my understanding though is that this is grant money, and I don't think there's any restrictions, but I have to go back and look. And essentially this is an ability for us to access this money to address dilapidated or distressed homes in our city as we go forward. And as the mayor related, it's not like we're going to go run out and do 30 or 40 homes. It's a balancing act in terms of what we need to do and whether in the particular area where that's at, depending on the house, whether we actually need to go ahead and do that. So this just gives us the flexibility and the ability to address some of the housing stock that has gotten to a point that this is the last option. Clearly, it's usually not an option in terms of you want to keep a home together, but this just gives us the ability to address it.
Okay. And is this anywhere close to the deal we had when we tore down the house on Cedar Point in aerospace? Is that kind of the same program, or is this a little different?
Well, that one was purchased by the city, and so that was our own house. So that was a lot different. you know, that, when we bought that, was it 4 years ago, I think, 3-4 years ago? That was a home that we acquired in the purchase of that property. So we addressed that on our own in terms of taking care of that.
Okay, and so we're not necessarily, there's a list online of the houses that they're in need of attention and what this money is for. We're not necessarily, we don't, in this agreement, we don't have to tear down the ones that are there. Because I talked to this one on my street, which I was surprised. I knocked on the door and the nice lady answered, and I thought, well, you know, it's weird that that's on the list. But I just want to make sure we're not, we're careful on that. We're not tearing down good houses.
No, this does not allow us just to go start yanking down houses. As the mayor related, there's a process that we have to go through. It's usually, the lion's share of the work is done by the building department in terms of identifying which properties are in the condition that need this kind of attention. And as the mayor related, he's been aggressive since he first got in and has addressed the major homes that were a real problem. On Michael Drive, on Sheldon, were two, just to name a few, that were addressed last year. And so there's still a process we have to go through. We just can't go in and take anybody's home. There's a process, and we're still going to have to follow it. This just gives us the ability to offset the cost of when we do get to the point, we decide that that home needs to be addressed to that level, that there's funds available, that we're not spending our own money to do it.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Chairman, if I may. And I gave Dennis the agreement. I apologize for you not having it. I thought it was sent over. But in the summary of the funds, $308 for eligible cost to demolish vacant, abandoned, nuisance, or blighted structures. So it's written broadly enough because in some cases they're a nuisance and or blighted. And if folks who were around here back when we did on Brook Park Road, we were most successful in condemnations on nuisances. So many of the councilmen get issues on that again. So what we'll do is we'll have Mike Dolan at a succeeding meeting, Mr. Chairman, to explain, as Neil said, ask the people on Michael Drive if it was an immediate thing to get the house torn down. It was not. Everyone has rights, including the property owners, but I think this gives us the ability to do some major things in addressing multiple problems of vacancies and fixer-uppers who do the minimal. I think it gives the city ability to set some standards, I think is what we want.
Councilwoman Powers.
These are called, some are bank-owned properties, so I want to know, I wouldn't want us to have a lawsuit because we tore down somebody's house that the bank owns. And between the bank-owned properties and if a house is vacant, but it's in very good condition, why wouldn't we want to either rehab it or sell it to someone as is at a very low price and whatever the bank would charge, and then have it rehabbed rather than tear it down? Because some of these houses I drove past look good except for, maybe a roof or something like that.
Okay, Neil, if I may comment first. The house on Michael Drive was exactly what you said. There are people who believed that they were going to rehab that house. Okay, they look nice from outside. And we have some folks here who have many properties in the town that think they're going to rehab something. For instance, a house that's very close here to City Hall. And I says, okay, come over there. I got Ted's report, and we have reports. I went in there and said, how in God's name do you think you're going to rehab this home? Had gaps in the floor that big. So while they may look that way, all right, and again, our city cannot suffer from speculators who improve the properties to rent them or flip them because you find out it just keeps going over and over again. What are we about? We're about improving the housing stock in our community. Some people have fell in that disrepair by no fault of their own. They had mortgages, they were subject to those problems, but Councilwoman, on the outside, many things might look good until you get inside the house and you say, listen, I would much more rather a combination of this. I'd rather what say, so you know what, why don't you tear that house down and build a new structure on that property, okay? If we get a hold of the property, we can contribute something to that. Maybe we contribute the lots. and here's the streetscape that we want, and here's the layout, and we're enhancing the stock of the value of our town. We're offering something new, all right? In the history of our town, we've lost so many people because we didn't have upward mobility of housing. All right? So what I'm saying is, in each one of these individual things, Ted has to do a very thorough report. There's a commercial building, I've been trying to, 2 of them, I would like to tear down over the last 2 years. But the law department and the building department and the fire department were all painstakingly. So even though when we think we're 100% right, it's not something. And we give everybody an opportunity. And not to be, beleaguer this debate, folks will come in and say, yeah, I wanted one proposal, I want to do this on this, out, this. Okay, well, can the city loan me the money? Well, if you are getting these properties and you're acquiring them, why is the city, you don't even have the money to acquire the property to begin with? So again, we have to fashion the program. I wish Jim Caucus was still here because he's got so much experience in this to make these things work, because it's a great threat to our town. And we have an opportunity to do it right. And believe me, I'm grateful we had this fund.
Well, you did propose, bring up over the last, some recent meetings, you said that we should be in the real estate business by making loans to people to fix up their houses. And I said, we have banks for that and mortgage companies for that. So why would we want to go into the real estate business? If you have the house there and someone wants to rehab it, then they have to go to the bank to get the loan, or the mortgage company.
I don't want to get in the real estate business. I'd like to acquire these properties and have them rebuilt on. And most of the ones, there are some of them that can be rehabbed. Yes, they can. And so therefore, if there's a small difference, how we structure the program, we can lend them the money and file a mechanics lien like anybody else. And hey, look, if you do this, this, and this, or we can say, you know what, here's the improvement you're making, why don't you make it a little bit better? Why don't you put an attached garage? Why don't you do streetscape on this? And the city will give you a low interest loan. I don't want to be in the real estate business. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't take control of this housing problem, it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. So the fact of the matter is, we have to do how do we structure the program? The biggest thing, if we got structures that need to be torn down, we now have a resource that we can use to tear them down. And a combination of other programs, hopefully, to rebuild the housing stock. So that's where I'm coming from.
Neil, you want to
If I
answer?
could just conclude, I just want to reiterate that this doesn't give us the ability or any easier to start tearing down homes. As I said earlier, there's a procedure in place, typically on nuisance homes, that the building department and other agencies go through to make those proper evaluations, whether a home is dilapidated to such a degree that in fact it needs to be taken down. So all this does is it gives us access to monies that if we ever get to that point, we're not spending our own money in terms of tearing it down. So this isn't going to accelerate, or we're not going to be rushing out to do this. It's just, this is money available that we're not spending our own money to address these homes. And it's not like we're buying them. These are still, the land is still going to be owned by whoever owns it, be it bank, individual, whoever. And just because it's in foreclosure or it's acquired by a bank in foreclosure, those sometimes become challenges to the extent that a lot of banks don't do what's necessary to maintain those homes. And as a lot of us in the last month have been going out into neighborhoods, you sort of know where those homes are. And if those homes get to the point where they become a nuisance to the city, to the people that live around them, to the neighborhood that they're in, then this gives us an option down the road to address it. So it's not like we're going to run out tomorrow or whenever this gets signed and start yanking down homes. There's as the building department and our department and the health department and the fire department, there's a process that we have to go through before we get to that. And so this is not going to accelerate that or change that. This is just giving us the tools that if we ever get to that point, we're not necessarily spending our own money to address those dilapidated homes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Mancini.
If I could touch on that, I know we want to get to council. When I first started walking, when Ms. Astorino said she was not going to run, Jimmy, get out there, the biggest thing was the housing. And in order to have a good community, as I always say, your housing stock plays a very big vital role in this. Why I like this piece here is because it's going to speed up the process with the banks. Two of the homes that the mayor talked about were in my ward. Out of that 300 on the vacants, I probably got about maybe, I would think 40 to 50 in my ward, and they just sit there. And I get neighbors, Jim, what's going on with that house? And then you check, and it switches over to one bank to another. Our building commissioner, Ted, could probably tell you a lot more on that. And it just gets old after a while. I mean, I was back 5, 6 years ago on a rubbish truck, and a lot of them houses that were vacant then are still vacant now. And we have to speed up this process if we want to become a better community. That's my take on this piece. Thank you.
Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is great. Getting money to do it. My big concern is always that we tear down houses and end up with vacant lots. That's always a concern to me. That being said, I'd like to second Councilman Salvatore's motion.
Okay, so there's a motion, and it's been properly seconded. Under discussion. All those in favor of Councilman Salvatore's motion is placed on tonight's council agenda. Is that correct?
Yes, under suspension of the rules.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No,
Okay, there's one.
rushed into too many things before.
Okay, that'll be
Rushed into.
under item 2 tonight, under first reading. It'll be ordinance number 9964-2015.
Mr. Chairman, before we conclude.
Councilman D'Amico, and then I'll go to you, Councilman.
We have tonight the council agenda under M, introduction of resolutions, ordinances, first reading, the resolution accepting recommendations, approving the minutes of the Housing Council of the City of Brook Parks Community Reinvestment Area. I talked to Mike Dolan, and actually the final report was to be filed with the Ohio Department of Development on or before the 31st. This is a time-sensitive issue. I'd like to ask council if they could indulge putting this on tonight's council agenda and passing by suspension, if you would, as it's a time issue sensitive piece.
Support.
That's already on.
Well, I mean, did it pass by?
Yeah, under suspension.
Under suspension is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Councilman Troyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask council and the chairman to consider scheduling an extra caucus meeting. Back in November, we put there were a bunch of ordinances to adjust the salaries of council and some elected members, and it's getting to the deadline. It would be May 10th. I think we should have a caucus meeting to discuss these ordinances, see if we're going to do anything on these. So I'd like to have it like either Thursday or the 21st at 7:30, which will be next Tuesday. So I'd just like to suggest we have a caucus meeting to discuss these ordinances.
Thanks, Councilman.
I support that.
Okay. Well,
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman,
I don't see why we can't put it on a regular caucus meeting.
can do
Put it on a
that.
regular
Because
caucus
it's time
agenda.
sensitive.
Because it's time
It has to be
sensitive.
done by
The next
May 10th.
council is on May 5th. So if
Yes.
there's concurrence, you'll suspend the rules and you pass it.
Okay, we can do it that way, but it's last minute then.
Yeah, but if you contact your colleagues, and you could do that. Okay, see no further business, we'll adjourn the caucus meeting.